Hello YouTube, it's Danny, and today we're going to be doing a dummies guide to overclocking an Intel chipset. Starting with the pros and cons of overclocking, what hardware you should consider having before you overclock, showing you how to do the overclock step by step, and then showing you the difference it makes between the stock and then the overclock. So without any further ado, we're going to roll this intro and start getting into the pros and cons. If you're going to overclock, you need to have several things in mind, such as, can you even overclock your processor? So Intel is pretty easy. So if you've got an Intel, focus. So anyways, if you have an Intel processor with anything with the K after it, is pretty sure it's going to be unlocked, and you will be able to change your voltages, and you will be able to overclock even more. So the i5, any i5 with the K under it, i7s with IK on it, some AMD processors, I'm not for sure on those, the Phenom like FX series you can overclock. Okay, so the second thing you want to consider is, can your motherboard support overclocking? See, I have a Z97 FTW, right? So this thing can support overclocking. See if I can find it here. Yeah, well, it can. It's designed, it's got a really nice overclocking utility on the BIOS, so yeah. So you want to make sure your motherboard can overclock. So today we're going to be overclocking with the Z97 FTW. Okay. Other things to keep in mind. So we're going to be creating more heat for this guy, your processor, right? So when we make more heat, you want a way to cool it. Now the stock cooler, I think I got it in here, it's pretty small. It's not really designed to dissipate a lot of heat, but if you don't have any other cooler, this will work if you're keeping it on stock temps. But when you're running extreme temps, like when you're starting to overclock and pushing it as far as you can, you definitely want to get something aftermarket. So you want to get something like a water cooling. But you say, Danny, water cooling's hard, I don't want to do water cooling. Well, don't fear, it is 2015 when I'm making this video, almost 2016. Guess what they make now? Since like 2013. Where is it at? All-in-one water cooling units. Yeah! Pretty much what they are. It's a pre-bundled, pre-set up water cooling unit. So, I like Corsair products. I'm with Corsair. But with any all-in-one water cooling units, any of them will work because they get about the same temps. So I like Corsair. That's my favorite brand of everything else. I got a Corsair case, Corsair, RAM, stuff like that, keyboard. Corsair, I like it. Also, we're going to be pushing the power limits past the designed function of the computer and possibly your power supply. So you want to keep in mind your power supply you're using for this. Because if you're like me, you're already overclocking 2 graphics cards, right? If I show you the fronts, maybe. You're already overclocking 2 graphics cards. So your next issue is, are you going to be pushing past your power limit? So, when you're choosing a power supply or trying to figure out what power supply you can have, right? Look at the power requirement for your graphics cards. See, if they say 600 watts, you should probably get about 750 watts. And if you're running 2 of them, you might as well be the safe bet and go for 1,000, just in case things get serious. So that's what I did. And plus it gives you upgradability. So if I want to get rid of my R9 290Xs and just go get 2 Titans, I'm pretty sure 1,000 watts should be fine. So another thing on the power supply, when you start an overclock, and it's another thing you got to keep in mind here, is you want to go for the power supplies that have the gold rating. See if I can get one to say, see. This one shows 80 gold plus. That's exactly what you want. That's really clean power, the stuff you're going to want. Because once you start getting dirty power and start overclocking and pushing things further than their design specifications, you might blow a circuit, you might blow your power supply, the lights might flicker in the house. I'm just saying, I've done this on personal experience and it is fun. But to avoid headache and blowing a power supply in the middle of a gaming session, you should probably get one that can handle what you're trying to do. They're worth the money. Well, other than that, hardware-wise, that's about it. You want to make sure your computer doesn't have any restricting airflow. Cases, you can choose whatever case. You just want to make sure it's got plenty of airflow, so your water supply, your all-in-one liquid cooling unit, can actually function the way it's designed to. So, without any further ado, let's start getting into some of the overclocking. Okay, before we start overclocking, we're going to need 3 programs to help test our stability and to check our temperatures so that we don't lose time during games or other activities on your computer because of a blue screen of death. So, we're going to need Prime 95, this little green guy here. We're going to need Cinebench and RealTemp GT. Okay, Prime 95 is what we're going to be using to stress test the machine. RealTemp GT is what we're going to be using to check our temperatures. Cinebench is what we're going to use to benchmark our before and after our overclock, so we know how much performance we have potentially gained from our overclock. So, without any further ado, once you get all 3 of these programs, I will have links of the programs or for the programs in the description below. So, alright, so to enter or to start overclocking, we're going to need to go into the Windows BIOS. Actually, before that, you probably want to run your benchmark. So let's run our benchmark real quick. So we have a starting point and have a reference what we're going to get. See, I've already benchmarked this a couple times. I'm getting 826, so we'll run it real quick. Okay. After we fast forward, we get at 3.5 gigahertz our Intel Core i7-4790K scored a whopping 837. This is what I've been getting consistently. From 826 to I guess 837. It jumped around 10 points roughly within a stock clock. It just depends how good the stock overclock goes. So now we have our base 837. So now we're going to enter our BIOS to start our overclock. Yes, we'll save that. So in order to enter your BIOS, for my particular motherboard, you just hit restart and just keep pressing the delete key until it enters your BIOS. So next time you hear from me, we'll be in our BIOS. Now we're in our BIOS. We are currently at 4 megahertz. Yeah. 0.40. Now, I know what my maximum overclock is, where I'm comfortable. So, but we're going to do this the slow and painful way because it's the correct way. So, on my motherboard, this is how I overclock. So, we're going to go down. We're going to go to multiplier, or CPU multiplier control. You're going to go auto to manual, right? So, this is the only one that I'm going to change here, right? So this is already going to start default at 30 or 35. We know my processor came out of the box at 4 gigahertz, so we're going to go ahead and bump that up to 4, right? So once we're at 4 gigahertz, now traditionally what you're going to do is you're just going to bump this up by 1, and you're just going to press F5. Wait, no, F5 is optimized as it defaults. F10. I'm going to save and reset. So the idea behind just bumping up the frequency 1 by 1 until we get failure is so that we can get the lowest voltage required to get the fastest clock, right? So now that we're on our desktop again with our 4.1 gigahertz overclock, we're going to launch our RealTemp GT. Alright, it's going to load up. It's going to have our temperatures here. Then we're going to go Prime 95. Also, I like having Task Manager open so I can watch the CPU frequencies a little bit more, and I can watch to see if I lose a processor or not. We're going to run. Now, I usually just hit OK and just run the default one. You can choose this top bracket here, and we'll just test the CPU. But this is like the worst case stress testing, so your temperatures will skyrocket when you're using that one. This one gives you a blend test. It gives you decent temperature results of what you're going to expect in actual use of the CPU. So this is one I normally use. You're going to press OK. It's automatically going to start testing, right? So now you don't want to let this run for about 5 minutes, right? You're going to keep an eye on your frequency. So we bumped it up to 4.1, and it's going to about 4.8, which is, in my book, about 4.1 gigahertz. So it's going to bounce a little bit. If you come up here, it says 4.09, which is about 4.1 gigahertz, which is pretty much where we wanted it to be. We have no failures yet. You're looking for the utilization. When you get a failure, it'll drop down to like 80%. So, and also it'll show you over here on Prime 95 as this goes. Now, in order to get the best stability testing, so here, what we're doing right now, we're going for the most we can get out of the CPU. So for each step, you want to sit for 5 minutes until you start getting instability at, you know, a higher voltage and a higher frequency. So you have to back it back down, and then you start doing your long stress tests that take an hour, 2 to 3, 4 hours. I know people who test these things for 24 hours. I've never tested a CPU for 24 hours, but I've tested them for about an hour at a time. So we're running this. It's been a couple minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and kill the test because my temperatures are well within acceptable range. So we're gonna stop the test. Okay. CPU go back down to like nothing. We're gonna reboot again, go back into our BIOS, and we're gonna bump up our frequency again. Now this is pretty much what you're gonna do. So you're gonna bump the frequency up until you get errors and crashes, and then you're going to bump your your voltage up to reduce your crashes, and you keep bumping. It's like a step. So I'll show you when we get in there. Go ahead and restart BIOS. I'm gonna go ahead and bump it up by 2. It'll be 4.3 megahertz, and see if I can get a failure to where I need to adjust my wattage here or my volts. But another thing with this motherboard, I'm pretty sure it'll automatically compensate for what I need because everything's set on auto. So depending on your motherboard BIOS settings, I think mine will be fine. I normally manually adjust my voltage, but I'm kind of curious. We're gonna see what 4.3 gigahertz does. If it doesn't crash, we're gonna keep bumping up the frequency until we do get a failure. So F10 to save. Okay, now that we're back on our desktop, same thing again. Got a real temp GT. Keep an eye on our frequencies. Okay, looks like 4.2 gigahertz so far. Doing startup applications. We're going to open this up, go into our performance window, and we're going to run it again. Running the test. 4.29, good enough for 4.3 gigahertz for me. Still no failures yet. Nothing has stopped. Still 100%. That's good news. So you're gonna keep an eye on your run time here. You're gonna let it run for a little bit longer. I'm hoping we get a failure, because what happens is you start dropping cores, and you'll see it when you're watching your task manager, and the cores go down. So see, this shows that the speed's fluctuating, although the speed up here is staying pretty steady. So temperature's well within the acceptable range. No failures yet. I'm gonna let this sit for a few minutes, and then we're gonna run back and bump it up some more. Okay, so we're not getting any failures, so we're going to shut her down. And we're going to go back into the BIOS. I'll go ahead and bump it up to 4.5 gigahertz. We're going to press F10 to save and go back to Windows. Okay, 4.5. So steady 100%. I can hear it's getting a little bit warmer. I think the auto voltage is kicking in. We're getting a little warmer. The fans are getting a little louder. There's still no failures yet. I'm actually getting pretty impressed. I've never used the auto function on the FTW version before. This might actually be my new replacer for all my motherboards. Huh. Pretty steady. No failures. Temps are still good. So we're going to go ahead and bump it up to 4.7 gigahertz to see what happens. Okay, now we're back in the BIOS. We're going to bump it up to 4.7. Okay, another thing to keep in mind, like if your motherboard doesn't come with all these auto settings and stuff, what you do is you change your multiplier, and you just every time you get a failure and it's not loading right, bump up your voltage a little bit. If your voltage just by one tick, go test it. If it works fine, come back, bump up your clock until it fails again, and bump it up. Bump up your voltage again, go run your clock. If it works, then keep bumping up the clock, right? And then you gotta keep an eye on your temperatures, because the more voltage you put through your system, the more heat you're going to make. So we're at 4.7 right now. I'm just gonna leave everything on auto just because I'm having really good success with it so far. Press F10 to save. Now we're back to the desktop. Now we're going to test the Prime 95 at 4.7 gigahertz. This is where I let off last time before I wanted my temps to get any warmer. Because look at her now. She's shooting up into the 50s. Still well within the acceptable range. So this is where the overclock where I find that I'm very comfortable with. But just for you guys, I think I'm going to push a little bit harder. But I'm going to do a different test. It's going to push the temps just a little bit harder. So I can show you guys why I don't go past 4.7 gigahertz. So, just like before, instead of choosing the one right there, the blend, I'm going for the small FFTS. So maximum FPU stress. So CPU stress. Let her go. Now, instantly you see the spike in temperatures. We're pushing dangerous limits here. So this is why I do not go past. Because at the worst case scenario, some program grabbed a hold, it would literally melt my motherboard if I went any higher. So this is where I'm going to say good enough for me. So that's pretty much it. So you're just going to keep testing and testing and testing and testing and testing and testing and testing. And then when you get where you think you're going to be good, come back and run this extreme test. And then watch your temperatures, watch for failures. Be careful. Don't want to heat soak anything. Don't want to burn anything out. Other than that, if you guys have any more questions, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And ask your questions in the comment box. And like I said before, the links to everything will be in the description below. Before we go, let's get that last benchmark in. Go ahead and stop these. We'll keep this open so you guys can see the temperatures and what they reach while it's running the benchmark. Okay, so before we reach the score of, was it 836? Yeah, right here, 837. This is our last score. So we save that. We're going to go ahead and run. We're going for 837. My last benchmark I ran, I got 949. See if we could beat that with this auto stuff. So as you can see under the benchmark load here, we're only reaching about 70 degrees Celsius. And under load, that's actually quite good. Now most people under load, they don't like their systems reaching over 65. I'm fine as long as it stays between 70 and like 77. Like that is a perfect temp for me. I don't stress it too much. She's staying about 68 average right now. I'm pretty happy with that. 916. So not as fast as controlling the frequencies by yourself, but also you gotta keep in mind that I probably don't have the RAM overclocked again. So, well, there you have it. Went from, let's see, the base clock of 837 to 916. Alrighty. If you have any questions, feel free to comment.